Today's guest, Dave Thibodeau, is the founder of Ska Brewing, one of the pioneers in American craft brewing. Since their founding over 30 years ago, it's been a crazy ride with them building their own manufacturing plant to opening a brick and mortar location the day of COVID shutdowns. And ultimately, a sale of the company last year in 2025. Dave, we're really excited to have you on the podcast opening soon.
Great. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Cool. So I really want to dive into what went on with Scott Street Brewstillery, but before that, we need to understand a little bit more about Scott Brewing, the founding story. Can you give us an overview of what Scott Brewing is?
Sure. I mean, like you said, we started almost 31 years ago now, and that was kind of before, the real boom in craft brewing happened that kind of took place over the last like 15 years.
Yeah.
Um, it's gone through these cycles, but we were relatively early on, starting in the mid 90s. And at the time, we were pretty young. We were punk kids, and we were really into ska music and punk rock. We were into beer. We were party kids in high school. Um, we got into brewing because we actually ran across a log book in my dad's bookshelves when we were in high school that it said beer book, and just the word beer piqued our curiosity, so we opened it up, and it was all his log sheets from homebrewing since the late 60s.
Oh,
And
wow.
so he was homebrewing long before Jimmy Carter made it legal to homebrew in the United States. And we got in there and we were trying to figure out where he made the alcohol and when he added alcohol, and we realized he made the alcohol. And that was just like a light bulb going on for us because we weren't old enough to buy beer, but all of a
Hmm.
sudden we figured out we could drink it. So we got into brewing in high school. And so we were, the things that we were into, like I said, ska music and punk rock,
Yeah.
and we were into comic books. And
Okay.
so we just kind of started brewing in our kitchen, and we got better and better at it, but we always called it Ska Brewing Company. And we started making labels with the early Apple Macintosh computers, and giving them out as gifts. And it was really novel at the time. And then fast forward a number of years till we're through college, and
And sorry, when you were brewing in high school, were your parents okay with this, or were you just doing it sneakily?
yeah, actually, my dad was totally stoked. He jumped right back in with us.
Oh,
Um,
wow. You got cool
yeah,
parents.
so and that was cool because he had a friend in Wyoming. This was in Denver, so a few hours north, a few hours drive north to Wyoming, and he had a friend who sold homebrewing supplies out of his basement.
Hmm.
And so we went up there, made a little journey up there, and bought all of our original stuff, and then yeah, started brewing again with my dad. Um, right,
That's fun.
kind of right out of the gates. And he brewed a lot with us in those first early years, and then we just kept brewing together. My friend Bill Graham and I, who I started the brewery with,
Yep.
and that's how we got. We brewed all through college. Every project I did in college as a communications major, whether it was a video or a technical writing paper or a speech, it was all on brewing beer. And
Nice.
so it pretty much consumed our lives after once we started to kind of figure it out. And
And
then,
was college local near home or
yeah, yep, I went to college at Metropolitan State College in Denver, and
okay.
Bill went to school at CU in Boulder. So we were maybe 45 minutes apart from each other.
Awesome.
So
And you're still
yeah,
doing the brewing at your house or on
yeah, either
campus or
either at my house or at Bill's house.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, and it was, I guess kind of the theme when we would brew. We had a couple of criteria. We had to, whenever you would brew, you had to listen to ska music, and you had to drink your previous batch of homebrew. And so it was kind of
Wow.
a, and then that's once we got to where we actually started the business, we just ran with the comic books, the ska music, and the craft beer, and basically that's the foundation of this place that we've had for 30 plus years now.
That's incredible. Tell me a little bit about the scale of this. Like, how many bottles were you brewing, or how many kegs, or how do we think about this?
Yeah, when we first started, We started in a little warehouse. We're in Durango now, and that's where we actually started the brewery in 1995. Durango is kind of a small rural town in southwestern Colorado, and so we started brewing in a little warehouse. Actually, it was the back corner space in a little warehouse in an
Hmm.
industrial park right outside of town, and at that time, our first full year, I think we brewed like 78 barrels of beer. And a
Mm.
barrel of beer is 31 gallons. And you might know what a regular keg looks like. That's
Yeah.
considered a half barrel. So a regular keg's 15 and a half gallons. So two kegs is a barrel.
Oh, I
And
see.
yeah, we probably brewed 78 barrels, I think was actually the number that first year. And then over the years, we peaked in about 2016 or 17 at about 37,000 barrels. So, yeah,
Wow,
quite a bit.
that's incredible.
Yeah,
And I know that throughout the journey, you had also invested into your own manufacturing plant. Is that correct?
correct. Yeah, so there's a few things there. Our brewery is relatively large. I don't know where we fall. There's about 10,000 breweries in the country right now, maybe just under that. And I think we're close to the top 100. We're what's called a regional specialty brewer, and that's
Okay.
anybody that brews over 15,000 barrels in a year. And so I guess, yeah, to put it in perspective, it's, I mean, when we peaked, it was close to a 500,000 cases of beer that year. So kind of gives you an idea. So that is
Hmm.
all in, um, if you kind of confusing question because we did have an actual canning line manufacturing plant, but we also have our brewery, which is manufacturing. So, assuming you mean the brewery, that's yeah, it's a good sized brewery. It wasn't just, in fact, when we started, it was only a brewery. There wasn't a tap room or a tasting room at all. So we
Okay.
were making beer just to sell it at bars and restaurants and stores.
I see. And a case of beer is just a normal 12 pack or
24, yeah.
24 pack?
24. Now it's
Okay.
all cans for us. So yeah,
Okay.
so 24 cans.
Okay. And how much does a case of beer sell for?
Right now it's probably our average price on the retail shelf is 40 to $45 for a case. So
Okay.
$10 to $12 a six pack.
Okay.
It's sold by six packs to the consumer.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's quite sizable, 500,000, and then selling at that amount. That's quite
Yeah, I
big.
think you know when we peaked, we do have a tasting room and a restaurant now, and then of course Ska Street, which you brought up, was the same thing. But in we had I think we were doing right around 12 million when we at our peak in a
In
year.
2016.
Yeah, in
Okay.
dollars. So, and I think we're 9 to 10 now,
Yeah.
probably.
Okay. And then how did you get the word out and sell to customers? Was it mostly to local bars, or was it through distributors and retail, or all the above?
Yeah, that's a good question for us in particular because there's distributors or wholesalers. It's very regulated, obviously, because it's alcohol.
Yeah.
A lot of politics involved as well. But generally, there's what's known as the three-tier system, which means that there's the supplier, which would be us as the brewer, and then there's a wholesaler or distributor, and then you go to the retailer, and then the retailer sells it to the consumer. So you can see, there's a lot of middlemen and a lot
Mm.
of margin disappearing at every
Yeah.
step of the way. And so Colorado was one of a few states when we started that allowed you to self-distribute. So it kind of
Oh, wow.
didn't adhere to the traditional three-tier system. So we were allowed to self-distribute our beer. So we actually started our own distribution company and eventually ended up selling beer in our neck of the woods for other brewers as well from all around the country.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So that helped us a lot because we controlled it and we didn't have to give up that margin. So
Uh-huh. So I guess for other breweries that aren't in Colorado, when they have a tap room or people coming in to drink beer, that isn't part of the three-tier system because it's at the brewery, or is that separate from being able to sell direct to the customer?
yeah, that's kind of separate. So a lot of breweries now only have just their tap room. So they have a small brewery, they brew beer and they
Yep.
only serve it by the pint in their own tap room. And that's obviously the most profitable way to sell your beer. Every step you take further from the brewery eats a chunk of of your margin,
Yeah.
and it's harder to control quality as well, obviously. So your best bet, your most profitable revenue stream is your beer directly over the bar that you made
Okay.
in house. And a lot of breweries do only that. Some breweries have a model where they do that, but in multiple locations. And then when you get like us, you try and find different distributors for different parts of the state or the nation or even internationally. So we sell beer in other places in the world actually, and we've sold beer all the way on the East Coast. We don't currently, but we have at one point in time. So there's
Hmm.
a lot of different models, and then there's breweries
Okay.
who don't have a tasting room at all and only distribute wholesale.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you open your tap room for your brewery? And like, give me the timeline of like when you opened the space that was the bigger brewery, and then when you decided to add on the tap room and invite people in too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we had this really interesting little space, and like I said, we were pretty young. We didn't have any money when we started, so we kind of bootstrapped things together. And when we started our first tasting room, I only knew of one other brewery, two other breweries in the state that had a tasting room at that time, and that was in the late '90s.
Oh wow.
And it was uh, it was interesting because we didn't even know we didn't understand the rules of that sort of retail outlet ourselves, even though that was who we sold to wholesale most of the time. But so it was very informal, very relaxed, and we probably gave away a lot more beer than we sold that first year or two in our tasting room. But that
Nice.
was in the late '90s, and then we were able to buy that building that we were renting from. After a number of years, we bought it from the owner. He was willing to carry whatever the bank wouldn't loan us, and that turned out to be one of the defining moments, I think, of our growth, especially early on.
So
And then
he
we event,
basically assumed a seller note on the piece or the land.
yeah. So the building itself had a number of tenants in it, and we were the smallest. And just coincidentally, as other tenants were moving out, we were growing and we were able
Mm,
to take a little more space. And then
yeah.
eventually, the guy who owned it decided to build another building for his sheet metal business and asked us if we wanted to buy his building. And we still had other tenants in it. And he just said, go to the bank, see what the bank will loan you, and
Nice.
then I will carry the rest for you. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And when you started off, how many square feet did you have? And then when you ended up, buying the building, how big were you guys?
We started out and it was probably close to 1,000 square feet. It was pretty
Okay.
small.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more than that if you include the little mezzanine that was in there. Um, and then when we finished, it was probably my guess is we probably had about 8 to 10,000 square feet. It was
Oh
kind
wow.
of interesting. Like we were just cutting through the walls and moving equipment in, and then what eventually ended up happening was we sold that building in 2008, and that we basically doubled our money just on the real estate. That was the best business move we ever made was a real estate transaction.
Two 2008, but during the recession,
Yeah, we did it right in the nick of time.
right before it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh wow.
2008 was everybody always used that as a reference point to the recession, but that was kind of when everybody started to realize it was happening. So it was still, early
Oh, so you got
2008,
out in time.
just in the nick of time. And
Nice.
we bought that building for $750,000 and sold it for 1.5. And then
Great.
we used all of that equity as a down payment to build the building that we're in today, which is now about 24,000 square feet.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. And the new building that you're in today, you spent, one and a half on there. It's also a brewery plus a tap room. And is there a restaurant attached too, or food?
Yeah, yeah, and we spent a lot more than that. That was just what we had as a down payment.
I see.
Yeah, so it was. I think we spent about 5 million building the building back in 2008,
Okay.
and and then at that time we had some friends of ours actually had a little taqueria in our outdoor beer garden in an Airstream trailer. So
Hmm.
it was kind of like ahead of the food truck craze. That wasn't such a big thing yet, and so it was kind of cool. It was kind of novel and unique, and it was a nice. They had a great business model. They had one brick and mortar space in Durango already, and then all along he said, "Hey, I want to get another brick and mortar space on the end of town that we were located in. When that comes up, I'm going to move,"
Hmm.
and he did. And so we built our own kitchen attached to the building, and we built it out of shipping containers. And it turned out to
Oh,
be really
wow.
cool. Yeah, and that was kind of early before you saw much of that going on too. So, and
Yeah.
we've expanded it a few times and expanded our beer garden. So now it's about we have a big outdoor beer garden, good sized restaurant, and tap room, and it's 2 stories. We have a lot of events. We have space that nonprofits can use, and
Hmm.
it's worked out great for us. Yeah.
Nice. And for the 5 million that it cost to build everything out, was that like a bank loan, or was that raised through friends and family?
Yeah, that was okay. I didn't mention our third partner. After our first year, Bill and I, we didn't really, it was fortunate that we had a friend who was really into home brewing, and we got to know him that year through brewing. But he really wanted to be a partner of ours, and we hit our slow season. Durango's very seasonal, and we were
Hmm.
only selling, a few accounts around town, and it slowed down, and we ran out of cash right away, early on, our first year, and he expressed interest at that same time, and we needed him because he was knowledgeable and ambitious,
Yeah.
and a few years younger than us, so we took on his name's Matt Vincent, and so we took him on as our third partner. So still until we sold it this past year, it was Matt and Bill and I the whole time.
And this was in 2009 or something?
That was from all the way from 1996 until
Oh,
just this past year.
okay.
Yeah, so it was 3 of us. We never had any other investors other than borrowing. All we did was borrow from the bank.
Okay.
Um, so nobody else. There was never any other owner, never any other investor. We got a mortgage from the bank to build the building, and then anytime we needed money or our line of credit or whatever after that, it was always the same bank for
Yeah.
all those years.
Gotcha. So, the space that you're in currently has a tap room, has a restaurant, has the brewery. What was the sort of makeup of revenue then? Was it, the distribution? Was it the tap room? Was it the restaurant? How did you think about the makeup?
Like kind of the way we're currently set up, or
Yeah, the revenue
yeah,
mix.
yeah, it's interesting. We're fortunately we're able to simplify things a little bit. We had probably the most complicated business model of any brewery I know, because we had a we had our own distribution company, and there's laws that prohibit or allow you to stack certain types of liquor licenses. So, you can have maybe this license and that license, but not this other license,
Okay.
depending on what your model is. So we had to get kind of creative. Our spouses actually owned the distribution company.
Mm,
But so we had a distribution company that it was our own company. So we would sell wholesale to our own company. And then that company would, sell to the retailer.
yep.
And then, of course, we had the retail in our tasting room, which was food and beer. Then we also have a space that we can rent. So we rent out to groups or parties, Christmas
Oh,
parties.
yep.
We let nonprofits use it. We have catering that we actually do in a situation like that. It's got its own special menu, and so we'll cater when someone rents the space. It's a little different than just our regular restaurant.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, without even getting into the Ska Street, it was pretty interesting. And then we also distributed other beer from for other people and
And
wine and spirits as well. Um,
wow.
so we had a fleet of vehicles.
Did Scott Brewing only distribute to your wholesale company or your distributor, or you also probably sold to other distributors too, right?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
all around the country. So yeah, so it was kind of
So you had like
it
10 different
seems,
revenue streams.
yeah, it was a lot of different revenue streams, and obviously, like I touched on earlier, the most profitable is just selling your own beer right across the bar by the
Yeah.
pint, and and selling like shipping costs are a huge one for us because we're in a rural area.
Mm,
So, and we have to go over some pretty high mountain passes to get in and out of here. So, shipping across the country, we eventually stopped distributing on the other side of the country because the costs were just too much, and ate into the margin. It just wasn't worth doing. And
yeah.
so, yeah, you kind of really have to look at all those different revenue streams and see what's really working. And some of it was out of necessity, um, and some of it was out of creativity where we thought we could probably make more money.
Yeah.
Um, and now since we sold it, we've closed our distribution side and we're with another local distributor. And then we have other distributors in other states and even in Colorado. And so to simplify it, I guess, our best profit and our best revenue stream is the stuff that we sell right here at at the brewery. We call it
Yeah.
the world headquarters, but it's just kind of a joke. um,
It's true.
and then yeah, and then our wholesale sales, that's kind of like the least profitable.
Okay.
And it takes a lot of attention at the same time. So you work hard to make very little as you grow with that type of model.
Okay. I see. I mean, I'm curious because you have done so many different things, and I think brick and mortar owners always find new ways to generate revenue through events or through selling the product or through licensing their brand. Um, Having done 6, 7 different revenue streams now, like shuttering a few, what are your thoughts on either one? Because both of them could work, but is it just less of a headache to simplify and then just focus on what you're good at? Or did you also appreciate the time that you had a more diversified revenue stream?
Yeah, both of those are true. I think at certain times, when we had that diverse of revenue streams, it was helpful, and we learned a lot. But now, now that we've sold it, and just to clarify, we sold it last summer, but I still work here full time. So it's very similar to what my job was before I sold it,
Yeah.
and but not having that distribution company and actually being able to focus, on our tasting room and just a few wholesalers, is it's so much simpler and less complicated than it used to be. And you can get pretty creative. Like we would always wonder, should we be, who should be making the money? Should the distribution company make more
Hmm.
money than the brewery? I mean, how is the pricing? How should we be working that? And there's all these factors that you have to take into consideration. And there's pros and cons to doing things any particular way, but it's great, I will say right now, to have it simplified. Much, much simpler than trying to run all the, and then the company that owned the real estate was also a different company. So, we had basically one accountant the whole time that was trying to,
Do
move all these
everything.
numbers
Yeah.
around.
I guess maybe a simpler question would be: do you wish you even did? Did you wish you maybe didn't even do the distribution back then and just focused on Scott Brewing, since the beginning?
No, I don't think so. I think it was good that we did. And I think a lot of the reason why was just what we learned.
Okay.
Managing a relationship with a distributor is not an easy thing, and we learned a lot because we had the perspective of both sides. A distributor's carrying a lot of other brands. And so, a lot of brewers will get pretty upset that they don't have enough mind shares, kind of the term we use,
Yeah,
within a distributor's house. And it's frustrating when sales are hurting for whatever reason or something goes wrong. And we learned a lot about managing that relationship and communication
I
because
see.
we had to do it from both sides with other suppliers, So, if they were upset with us, we could understand, why, and maybe how we might not want to, or maybe we do want to react or manage a relationship with our wholesaler that way as well. So
Yeah,
I'm grateful that we did
yeah.
it, even though it was very complicated for a lot of years.
Yeah, it makes you smarter understanding both sides. So now it positions you better as a brewery and managing that relationship. That makes
Totally,
sense.
totally.
Okay. This is all super great, and I think also a great setup for what Ska Street Brewstillery is. So, uh, talk us through what that concept was, and what happened.
Uh, okay, so Bill and I also owned a distillery in another part of the state, and it was called Peach Street Distillers. We opened that in 2005 with another friend of ours, unrelated to Matt. Matt was not part of that business. Matt later actually opened a fabricating business making canning lines called Ska Fabricating. Bill and I weren't part of that business.
Oh
Anyhow,
my
the three
gosh.
of us and our COO at the time, he's now our CEO, and another our sales guy from Peach Street got together and basically started another business. It was really a Ska and a Peach Street thing. We just
Okay.
needed some more money, so there was more people involved, all good people that we work with, and uh, and we decided to create a brewstillery. So we would have a brewery and a distillery and a restaurant in one space.
Wow.
Very complicated from a licensing perspective in Colorado,
Do
but
do people do this? Is this like a one of a kind thing, or has this
at,
happened before?
at the time, I think we were the only one in Colorado, and I knew of a couple others around the country, but very unique and
Yeah.
really difficult to get licensed in Colorado. There was a lot of hoops we had to find to crawl
Sure.
through, and
And the distillery is what type of spirit?
so that distillery did a lot of stuff, but our focus was bourbon. But we
Bourbon.
also did
Okay.
clear spirits, gin and vodka, but bourbon, different types of whiskeys.
Okay.
Um,
Got it.
So yeah, and so we did that in Boulder, and it took us a good part of the year. It was in a former brew pub space. Brew pub being a brewery that has a restaurant and a tap room.
Okay.
Just a regular manufacturing brewery generally doesn't have the restaurant part, so that's the
Yeah.
difference there.
And what
Little
year
fun.
is this?
This is 2020 when we opened it up. So.
But the
Um,
preparation, even before you
so
opened it
it
up,
was
like when
throughout
did you guys
most of,
start?
yeah, most of 2019. So
Okay.
we started in early 2019, and then we opened our doors on March 16th of 2020,
Yeah.
which was the same day that all the bars and restaurants got closed down in Colorado due to the pandemic.
How big was the space that you guys got in Boulder? How much were renovations? Like how much money did you put into it? Well, yeah, I'm curious.
We spent, it already had a brewery in it, and the brewery had been seized by the brewing equipment had been seized by the state, and because I think it was taxes or something that the previous owner didn't pay,
Okay.
so they had an auction, and we were able to get all of the equipment for a good price. I think right around $100,000 for all the brewing equipment, and we had a lot of the distilling equipment too. We spent a little bit of money there.
Hmm.
Um, we each put in some money, and then we borrowed the rest. And I think we were able to actually get opened for about $500,000.
Oh, that's not too
It
bad.
wasn't bad because it was a beautiful functioning kitchen. The kitchen was great. The restaurant, we just used all the same furniture. We changed it, painted, updated everything. But the space was great. I think there was just some mismanagement with the previous owners, but they
Yeah.
had a good thing going in a good place, and we were really fortunate in that our COO at the time, um, his good friends were actually the landlord.
Nice.
That was kind of coincidental. So we got the equipment from a state auction,
Great.
and then we knew the landlord and were able to, negotiate a lease with them. Out to be a little bit of a problem once things didn't totally work out. And
Yeah.
yeah, so we were able to get in there for a, a good a good amount of money. I mean, not it wasn't exorbitant considering what we had. It was a nice big restaurant, so
How
bigger
many
than what
square
we
feet
got.
was the space?
Oh God, I can't remember exactly, but I bet it was maybe God, it was probably 8,000 square feet
Okay.
easily. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
and
pretty sizable.
it was nice. Yeah, I can't remember the exact capacity, but quite a few people could fit in there.
Yeah.
So it didn't need a lot done to it, just enough to make it look a little different. It was all
Hmm.
very functional.
So was it true that the day you opened was the actual day of shutdowns?
Yeah.
That's
So we
crazy.
actually had a grand opening on Monday, March 16th, and we started at 5 o'clock. And at 5:45, our governor came on TV and had his press conference and said, "We're shutting all the bars and restaurants down." And we bought everybody a shot and shut down
Oh my God.
during our grand opening. It was an hour and 11 minutes long. It was 71 minutes long.
That must be a record.
Yeah, we were open for 71 minutes before the state shut it down.
And I
Oh, it was such
know,
a bummer.
yeah, it seems like, over the next couple years, you were open, not open because of obviously COVID restrictions, but um do you think that it's just because of COVID where if you had opened maybe a few years earlier, the concept would have worked?
I feel so. I feel it would have. The space was great. It was kind of everyone thinks of Boulder as a college town. This was kind of out of the campus area, kind of not in the middle of where all the students are. It was kind of more of an office park, really. And I think there was a little Google campus there, and so it did a lot of its business at lunch and at happy hour, which
Hmm.
was great for us. We didn't want like a party crowd. We wanted lunch and happy hour,
Yep.
and close early. And unfortunately, as everybody knows, what happened with COVID was that a lot of commercial space, particularly office space, never still hasn't come back.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it was it was great because it had the built-in crowd that we really wanted. Fairly affluent and it was like the right age as far as the demographic go. They were all craft beer consumers. The other brewery had done fairly well as far as total revenue goes. I don't know what their profit looked like, but
Hmm.
we had some of their financials before we ever ended up getting the space, and it wasn't bad. And so I think it was everything was right except for the timing.
The timing. Yeah, that's
Yeah, and
unfortunate.
I don't think we could have opened it there anytime after COVID, but had we opened it a couple years before, we might have been able to survive. But
Yeah.
as you mentioned, we were open with all kinds of restrictions for the over the course of almost 2 years before we just said this isn't going to work, and we ended up closing it down
I see.
permanently.
What
Yeah.
what's what's the top line of something like a brewery pub like that? In an 8,000 square feet. What is realistic, and how does someone think about it versus just a normal bar versus a restaurant? Is it just combining both, or I'm assuming it's more alcohol sales a little bit, but
Yeah, we because we did have access to the financials of the previous, brew pub that was in there. So our projections for the first full 12 months were at about 3 million.
hmm.
Um, and it was very close to 50-50 food to alcohol.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and that's the crazy thing because even here at where our headquarters are now, we're probably like 60% food, 40% beer and alcohol, whereas those numbers were flipped before COVID. You had
Hmm.
people out here playing games, standing room only drinking beer, and then COVID kind of forced tables that were 6 feet apart from each other, and it just changed the behavior of our core customer.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, and so at that time, and like I said, with beer being fairly profitable, it's more profitable than food if you do it right.
Yep.
And so the model was great because what we would be doing is selling a lot of our own beer that we made where it was more efficient here at our world headquarters, selling it to ourselves at the brewstillery, and then brewing, unique one-off fun batches, smaller batches of beer up there. But all the flagships, brew it on our big system down here in Durango, where we can do it less for less money and more efficiently.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're our own best customer. So the model was great. I really believed in it, and we were really, really excited before we actually opened.
Yeah. That's just unfortunate timing. In a parallel universe, it would have been a hit. It makes sense to
Yeah.
me. What do you think about just the overall industry of less consumption of alcohol? And have you felt that with your brewery? And have you seen that? Because you see all these charts where alcohol consumption is at a 30 or 40-year low or something like that, and the Gen Z don't drink anymore.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's absolutely true, but it's to frame it a little differently. It's not as much less consumption overall because at the same time the population is growing so much
Hmm.
too. It's more things like you said where Gen Z drinks less than millennials did. And so you are seeing different demographics that drink less. Obviously, a lot of my friends, I'm in my 50s, so a lot of my friends are drinking less beer just for health reasons or whatever it might be. They just don't go out as much, and so that's all true, and we've definitely felt it. I still feel like the pandemic changed some of that behavior, that's still kind of we haven't really come out of that. It just changed hanging out at a pub.
Yeah.
That's taken some time to come back, and I think that's part of why you're seeing that. But you see in our space a lot of people, they're brewing non-alcoholic beers. We actually
Yep.
have a THC beverage now, a super low dose THC beverage. We have non-alcoholic seltzers, and we have CBD drinks, and so it's
You
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 know I
guys are
get
you guys are making non-alcoholic and non-alcoholic seltzers?
Yeah, we have
Oh wow.
it's called Skagwa.
Okay.
Um,
Oh,
that's
like
something we've
agua.
had
Okay,
for
I like
years
that.
and years. Yeah,
It's fun.
it's like just sparkling water, flavored sparkling water.
Yeah.
We don't distribute that very broadly. It's just around southwestern Colorado.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so we try to have offerings like that because the crowd's pretty diverse that comes in here. There's obviously a lot of people that are still really into craft beer. Um, and then but a lot of them have friends that either, they're trying to drink less, or maybe there's a gluten sensitivity,
Yeah.
and then there's all the health warnings, and, and then, generations of people that don't drink as much. All that being said, I have faith in beer. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years, and I think a lot of the other stuff you see is kind of trendy and it'll come and go. A lot of
Hmm.
the functional drinks, I think some will come and go. You'll see a lot of um, the ready to drink cocktails. There's hard teas and lemonades and anything you can think of mixed into a can. Some of that's going to come and go, and it has in the past. There was things like Zima or Bartles and James way back
Mm.
when, and they're trendy and maybe they're good at the moment, but beer somehow stands the test of time,
Yeah.
and beer's always there and it always has been, and I think it always will be, but it's always going to have its peaks and its valleys.
Yeah.
So
I think that's right because I remember seeing the chart and it was saying like lowest consumption in 30 or 40 years, but the chart it looks like this. It like
yeah,
oscillates between a
absolutely.
band of 45 and 55%, and then obviously they make the y-axis really dramatic,
Yeah.
and like make it look like it's a huge drop, but the actual drop's like 4%. So
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, if you look per capita,
Yeah.
it's not so drastic. But if you do it generationally or whatever, the graph can show a different picture. So
Yeah.
it's it's got to be, and it's funny because there's so many articles about it, and sometimes you just don't know what the context truly is.
Yes.
Um, but there's no doubt about it. People are drinking. I mean, there's less beer being consumed overall, but not that much overall.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. And then, so with Ska Street Brewstillery, you ended up closing that in, it was 2022. Is that correct?
correct. Yeah.
Okay. And then the focus was back onto, Ska Brewing, and you ultimately sold last year. So I guess talk me a little bit through the decision to sell in 2025.
Yeah, I think I think there's a couple lessons there. The brewstillery, that whole exercise definitely made us kind of gun shy as far as we've always been pretty progressive and fairly averse to like, I mean, we were willing to take risks pretty much throughout our entire existence, but then the Ska Street episode, that at least changed for me,
Hmm.
changed the way I started to think about things. I started thinking about, wow, I have a lot of personal guarantees. My house is on the line, and maybe everything isn't going to succeed, And so I think I became a little gun shy, and it took a lot of energy. So it was exhausting to go through that.
Yeah.
So, so I think that coupled with, it was kind of the perfect storm. There was COVID, there was generational things happening with less alcohol, shelves being more crowded with different types of beverages. A lot of that stuff is called beyond beer, whether it's
Mm.
ready to drink cocktails or whatever it might be. Um, and uh, and so it just became, and obviously more breweries. Suddenly
Yeah.
we're looking at almost 10,000 breweries in the country. All of this was happening at the same time. In the late teens into the 2020s, and so things did definitely get very tight for us. I feel like we were really fortunate in that we bought our real estate along the way, with plans to do more. We own some land right next to us, and so we had these other assets tied to the business, but not necessarily the business.
Hmm.
And things started to get tight. The land, for example, we never built anything on it. We bought that just before COVID, and then once COVID hit, everything changed, and so we didn't. Our vision, wasn't going to come to fruition. So, but we still had to pay for it.
Yeah.
So things started to get tight, and also distribution got more expensive. So we started shrinking our footprint,
Mm.
and so yeah, sales just slowed down for us, and it was still manageable. It was still great. It was still a lot of fun, but I think the complexities with our particular business model um, made it kind of like we were on the verge of maybe not paying our bills later that next year.
Oh,
It
wow.
was definitely getting tight. At the same time, two local guys that had been in the beer business um, and owned the distributorship here in town, the distributorship that sells Coors beer, those guys had expressed interest. We've known them for years. They'd expressed interest in buying the brewery and the real estate and the distribution from us.
Mm.
Obviously, there's some synergies there because then they can move the distribution of our beer in the Durango area over to their distributorship. And
Yeah.
we're very have a solid foundation. Our sales are really strong in our backyard. And so they get that, and then they own the brewery. That shed me of all the debt, and my two partners, Matt and Bill. And so it just kind of, it seemed like a great idea for all of us to consider it. And I always thought this would be something that stayed in my family, forever. And I just never pictured myself doing anything else.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we were really fortunate that Bob and Dave, the new owners, were there at that time, and they're having fun with it, and that was kind of the idea. Is like and I think, if we can without that debt as part of the actual business model, and with some of the resources they have due to the owning their own better distribution company than ours, um, I think we I think we'll climb out of this kind of downcline that the industry has seen,
Yeah.
and we can weather that little bit of a storm maybe longer than some other breweries. And I think the resources that are at our disposal now, all of that together, it just made perfect sense. And things are looking bright. There's renewed energy, and it was just a couple years there where things were really tight, and it did feel pretty desperate. So we
Yeah.
sold all the real estate, the distribution company, the brewery, all of it, um, to these guys, and they're retired, and but they're Durango guys, so everybody knows them, So it's
Mm.
nice to keep it local. They let me stay around, and they're they're well known in the community, and that's kind of that's one of our core values that I didn't want to go away, is being helpful and strong in our own community. So all of
Yeah.
that all of that gets to stay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the best of both worlds for me.
Yeah. No, you still get to run the business and steer it over the next few years with ample resources to continue growing. So
Yeah, yeah,
um,
great.
that's great. Yeah, sometimes you just have to like it seems like to weather some of these downturns that are industry wide. And who knows like what's going to happen in the next few years when everyone has a newfound discovery of craft brewing and it becomes nostalgic for uh,
Yeah,
millennials and whatnot. So
I think that's exactly what we're going to see happening. So that's to me, it
it's
just seems great,
yeah, it's interesting because I'm partly in the photo booth business, and photo booths were basically kind of dead for the last 10, 15 years. But in the last couple of years, there's been a huge resurgence of interest in photo booths, especially amongst Gen Z, because everyone is so chronically online and on their phones and computers and digital that they actually want to go to a physical space to take pictures and get photo strips.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean we've hired somebody that we know that has a booth too, like our last couple anniversary parties, just because people love it now.
yeah,
It's great.
things can always change. So, um, Dave, yeah, this has been super awesome. You've had a crazy journey over the last 30 or plus years. I'm curious, with all the knowledge that you have now, is there anything that you would have changed going back?
You know, I there's certainly some lessons that I learned. Um, I don't. It, it's hard for me just in where my head is nowadays. There's not much that I regret. You learn from your mistakes, and probably wouldn't get to the point that I am, which I'm stoked about, um, without some of those things happening. But there's knowing what I know now, I can see a couple stages along the way where I wouldn't do the same thing that I did,
Yeah,
but I don't regret that I did them then.
yeah,
Um,
that's fair. Which one are those stages that you would have done differently?
there's two things that jumped right to mind.
Yeah.
One is um, making decisions that I'm uncomfortable with, or that we're uncomfortable with, because of
Mm,
fear of scarcity. We An example of this was, we thought we were not going to be able to get the type of hops we wanted in the quantities we wanted, because it just seemed like there was going to be a shortage. And we signed a bunch of contracts for a lot of hops to get a good price. And they were like 5-year contracts. And then consumer preferences changed. And it turned out you could buy them on the spot market for a little bit more. And suddenly we didn't need all those hops. The
mm,
beers, we weren't using those hops for the styles of beer we were making, but we were tied into 5-year contracts that we had to buy out for hundreds of thousands of dollars with hops
wow.
that we didn't even want to use. So, and that was just because fear of scarcity, and it was like there was a whole nother way to approach that, and we weren't the only ones who did it. There was, and it's been that way. Like if you're using a lot of raw materials as a manufacturer or whatever, as a food producer, you know that's that can happen a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
climate plays a big role there, transit, shipping, all kinds of things. And sometimes you get nervous, and I certainly wouldn't sign these long contracts. And it's even that brings me to the other thing. Like when we sold, we had another contract that had successor language in it, and it was for our CO2. Um, Contra- Really understanding what's in a contract and having an attorney really go through it and point
Hmm.
everything out to you. Don't just take a big contract for granted and sign it.
Yeah.
Um, we signed a contract for our CO2 that had a lot of clauses in there for force majeure that they could implement, and then they just kept up in the price until it was ridiculous, but we couldn't get out of the contract. And then even when we sold, they had successor language in there. And this is the company is one of the biggest companies and corporations in the world, the parent
Uh-huh.
company. So I'm not going to mention it, but
Sure.
they obviously had quite a team of lawyers put this thing together. But it had personal guarantees. So I thought we ended up working our way out of it, but we almost had to buy our way out of it for $500,000.
Oh my God. And you're saying
Yeah,
CO2 as in like gas for the
that's what
brewery?
carbonates beer. Yeah.
Ah.
So yeah, it's
Wow.
crazy, crazy. So, and then, same with even the, like, even getting out of the lease when we closed down Ska Street, we had personal guarantees, and it was a friend who was the landlord, and it turned awkward. So, really looking
Oh,
at personal guarantees, like, a lot of suppliers, they want your business no matter what. You shouldn't just accept an initial contract. That's
yep.
definitely something I've learned. Don't just guarantee everything because that seems like the way it is.
Yeah.
You could just say no. I'm not signing a personal guarantee,
Yeah.
and you're still going to get their business, or they're going to
Yeah.
get yours. So
I love that. Especially as when you're an up and coming player, you assume this is the standard and you don't want to step on people's feet, especially if it's like a bigger company and you assume like
totally,
everything needs to be this way, but everything's negotiable in
yeah.
business at least. So
Regardless of what you want to say about attorneys, um, it's still worth having one look at your complicated contracts.
yeah. Final question for me actually is because it came to mind. Do you use AI now to read your contracts, to do these drafts, docs, etc.? And how do you use them at Ska?
Yeah, I use AI quite a bit now. And yeah, looking at things like contracts. Unfortunately, our CEO now, I stepped down, and our COO Steve Breesley stepped into the role of CEO. And he's the guy that has to deal with most of our contracts. But going through that whole selling the business, that we had teams of lawyers
Hmm.
on the buyer side that were really looking at stuff. So I was really just starting to understand the potential with AI when we first started working on that. So I didn't really get into that with contracts now, but I would definitely use that for any contract
Yeah.
that I had to use. But I use it all the time for just kind of general research. I use it to help write press releases. Um, I use, I mean, we use it for kind of marketing campaigns. And I like to, I don't like, I still feel weird about robots doing too much for me and too much of my thinking.
Yeah.
So I like to use AI as a starting point for any given project, but then just jump into taking it from there.
Yep.
And it could be anything. I mean, I am quick to go to AI if I for whatever I might be looking to find out,
Same.
or do.
Same. Yeah, no, but to your point, I don't want to lose my critical reasoning ability. I want to
Very
still
much
be able
so.
to analyze things, but it's so easy to just have AI do it. Um,
Sure
so
is.
we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
Dave, thank you so much for joining the pod. If people want to, follow up or send you a message, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, you can reach me it's at Ska Brew Dave on Instagram. Easier even is just Dave at skabrewing.com. Probably I'm always looking at email still, and those are probably the easiest ways to reach me. And
Cool.
even old school, you can always call me right at the brewery.
Awesome. I love
So,
that. It'll be
yeah,
you answering, not an AI, Dave, right?
that's right. Yep, it's
I
actually
love
me.
it. Great. All right. Well,
Cool.
Dave, I really enjoyed this. And do you guys distribute in California?
We used to. We don't any longer.
Okay.
It's come up recently getting back out there. So I have a lot of good friends out there. I spend a lot of time in Southern California, and I'd love to have our beer back out there again at some point. So
Cool. Well, when I'm in Colorado, I'd love to come by and take a look
please
and a drink.
do.
So, all right. Thanks,
Thanks,
Dave.
Alan. I appreciate it.